So I wanted to start doing something a little bit different from what I usually do. If you've seen any of my content on Smashified or on this channel, then you know that I'm a very creative-centric person. I like creating things, and I like creating art, music, things like that. I haven't really done a lot of editorial or opinion pieces or discussion videos about things in the gaming industry, but it's something that I am passionate about and something that I wanted to do. It's just that I haven't really had a lot of time to do it. So I wanted to start putting this type of video together. It's always going to be probably voice-based, just because I don't have a lot of time to put together a setup for having a camera pointed at my face. Quite frankly, my face isn't all that interesting because I'm not a very expressive person, but I wanted to put together something that's more effective than spouting my opinion on Twitter, because, 140 characters isn't a great way to get my thoughts across effectively, and it's not a good way to start discussions. So I feel like this is a platform that I can use to very casually but still more effectively get my thoughts and opinions expressed. Now, I do want to start by saying that I am a very loyal Nintendo enthusiast. And I say enthusiast very intentionally because I feel like the word fan or fanboy doesn't really have very good connotations. I think a lot of times people say that a fanboy is somebody who has very blind loyalty toward a company or a product. And I feel like that's not me, because I like to be as objective as possible. Do I like Nintendo a lot? I do. Do I think that they make mistakes? Yeah, I do. I think they make a lot of mistakes, but I also care very much about that company and about the products that they create because I love Nintendo's franchises. I play Nintendo games almost exclusively. I haven't owned a non-Nintendo console since the PS1, to put that in perspective. Have I played other consoles since the PS1? Of course. I've had a lot of friends who have other consoles and I play on theirs, and my last roommate had almost every console, so I played a lot of those, but I've not personally owned a non-Nintendo console since the PS1. So again, just to put that in perspective, frankly, I don't actually play games very often, which calls into question why I'm so opinionated about them. But nevertheless, I do have my opinions, and I do want to be able to share those in a way that fosters discussion. And I do want this to be sort of a two-way thing. So if at any point I say something stupid, let me know in the comments, or if you just want to be able to go back and forth, because I do like to have discussions in YouTube comments, as much as it's very counterproductive as far as getting things done in life. I do enjoy doing it, so leave comments if you want, and let's talk. So Nintendo Switch has been recently revealed, finally. We don't have to call it the NX anymore, but I'll probably actually still call it NX on accident at some point, but I'll try not to. So what do I think of the Nintendo Switch in general? I think it's a great idea. I do think that there are some caveats, some concerns that I have, but overall, I think it's a great, solid idea. Let me talk a little bit about why. I think the biggest thing is that it removes the need to support two platforms simultaneously. And I think this is huge because it allows Nintendo to focus on one platform and focus on creating a steady stream of content for one platform. When we have the two platforms, the home console and the handheld, as two different departments, two different facets of their business, we always saw these droughts for each one whenever they focused on creating content for the other. So whenever Wii U was getting content, 3DS was not. And whenever 3DS was getting a large amount of content, the Wii U was suffering. And for the two demographics, that was bad because some people only had the Wii U or some people only had the 3DS. So I feel like this eliminates that problem and makes it so that games that are traditionally made for handhelds are also available for players who like home console gaming and vice versa. So if you're somebody who likes handhelds and you don't really care about playing at home because you're traveling a lot or something like that, then everything that's made for a home console will also be available to you to play. And I think that's great. That's awesome. Do I think some people wouldn't see value in that because they only like one or the other? Perhaps. But at least they're not going to have a drought of content. Now, I also think it's beneficial for Nintendo to create something with a focus on portability because it makes any lack of power compared to the other competitors' offerings seem more acceptable by comparison because it is portable. I think there's an expectation that if something is portable, then power will be a little bit lower in comparison to something like a gaming PC or even something like the PS4 Pro or the Scorpio, whatever that's going to end up being called. So it's probably going to be something where the spec lovers, the graphics lovers, are going to be okay with having this as a companion to their main primary thing. And people who don't care about graphics will also not be bothered by the lower graphical fidelity, So I feel like this is a win-win on that front. I also think that the trailer was well designed. We didn't see any kids, which I thought was a very deliberate thing for them to do, because I always felt like Sony had it right when they create their ads for adults, because I feel like kids inherently kind of want to be like adults. They look up to adults, and when they see adults doing something, they kind of want to do it themselves. It's sort of in their nature. I'm not an expert on kids by any means, but I feel like that's a trend. So I feel like if you're going to be appealing to adults, but having content that appeals to kids, then I feel like you're going to just capture everybody a lot more effectively than if you were to try to present your content as family friendly through kids rather than through adults. Because adults might look at something that's targeted towards kids and say, well, that's some babby game. I don't want to play that. But I feel like this is a better approach to accomplish the same goal. Is Nintendo still creating content for the entire family, for a broad demographic? Yeah, totally. They're still making Mario. Mario is great for kids and adults. It's not like Halo where it's meant specifically for adults and kids shouldn't play it if you're a good parent. But I think this is the best way to go. Now, a lot of people are saying that this concept isn't really original. And I do have to generally agree that it's not an original concept. Nintendo is not the first one to attempt to solve the design problem of playing home console experiences on the go. The PlayStation Vita did that with its streaming from the home console over the internet to your Vita, and I don't think that was a great solution because it introduced problems like latency, which is, I think, a very big deal when it comes to gaming. Then we had that Morphous tablet. I don't remember the company that created that, but obviously that didn't catch on because we didn't hear about it until now. Then you have things like the NVIDIA Shield, which also did streaming from a gaming PC, and so that also probably introduced some latency. So while these are all different attempts to solve home console or home gaming on the go, I feel like this has an opportunity to do it best. And people, as I said on Twitter, people don't really care who did something first. They care who did it best. They care who did it in a way that meets their needs and wants. I mean, after all, PlayStation has copied a lot of Nintendo stuff, but sometimes they do it in a way that's more appealing to their demographic. And so something like the PS4, there's nothing really all that innovative about the PS4, but the PS4 does a lot of things well, and so people want to play it on PS4. I mean, look at Palm or BlackBerry. They started creating PDAs and then eventually smartphones, right? Like some of them weren't touch-based or anything like that, but that's what they were. They were smartphones. They were personal computers that were so small that they could fit in the palm of your hand, and they helped you with everyday tasks like scheduling and other things. They had various applications. But then iPhone comes in and completely wipes them off the map. I mean, it doesn't matter who did it first. Just do it better. Do it in a way that's elegant, and people will buy your product. People will prefer your product. So that's what I think about the whole originality argument. But enough of that topic. I feel like I've been really redundant so far, so I'm just going to move on to the next thing. Now, I asked some of you guys on Twitter what I should actually talk about in this video, and a lot of you said that you'd like me to talk about the actual physical design of the hardware, and I think that's a great idea, but as I was outlining what I was going to talk about in this video, it dawned on me that there's a lot of points that I want to cover when it comes to the actual design, so I think I'm going to separate that into another video, and I'll just talk about one particular point as it pertains to design and third-party support. And that might sound a little bit weird, but let me elaborate. So when looking at the Joy-Con controllers in particular, I have a little bit of a concern that the multiplayer experience played with the Joy-Con controllers would have to be designed around having a lot fewer inputs than you would have using the Pro Controller or both Joy-Cons together. Now, what I mean is when you're using the Joy-Cons separately, as in one person gets the left, one person gets the right, you're cutting the amount of inputs you have in half. And while you still have a number of inputs that are useful, you have an analog stick and you have face buttons, and presumably you have two shoulder buttons that are actually located along the edge that gets attached to the screen. At least that's what it seems like based on the footage. People consistently had their fingers along that edge, and it seemed like they could press buttons that are built there that get obscured or hidden when you actually put it along the track of the screen or the Joy-Con grip. So, presuming that there are actually shoulder buttons there, you still basically have a SNES controller, but instead of a D-pad, you have an analog stick. That's great, but it's not the same as having two analog sticks and then a separate D-pad, 4 face buttons, 2 triggers, and 2 shoulder buttons above the triggers. So, is that going to be a limitation for third-party developers creating local multiplayer scenarios? Because, I mean, obviously not a lot of other consoles really put a focus on local multiplayer anymore, which is a bit sad. But is that enough inputs for third-party developers? Is that going to create a bottleneck for design? So that's a concern that I have. It might not be a problem. People might just design well for it. And if the console is well adopted, then they're going to be forced to design for that if they want that type of multiplayer to be a facet of their game's design. Now, there's obviously plenty of games that don't require that many buttons. You've got Super Mario Brothers, Rayman Legends and Rayman Origins. Plenty of platformers just don't require that many buttons, but there might be a local multiplayer experience that someone wants to develop that demands more buttons than the individual Joy-Con can offer to a single player. Now, I think it's a legitimate concern. I don't think it's a deal breaker by any means, but I think it could be potentially something that works against Nintendo if they don't have, their other ducks in a row, like having enough support early on, having enough adoption early in the year, things like that. Now, there's no saying that every game has to support 2 separate Joy-Con multiplayer. I imagine that's not going to be something that every game does, but it's still a concern that I have. Now, I do also have some other questions and concerns. For instance, is the screen a touch screen? I feel like because the screen can't be accessed when docked, that most experiences would need to be designed without touch in mind. However, if they want to appeal at all to the market that uses smartphones for gaming, then will they allow you to have some experiences that can't be played on the television? Would they have some experiences that are designed specifically for when you're in portable mode? I feel like that'd be a good idea. I feel like it shouldn't be a limitation that you have to design for both TV and when you're on the go. But it seems like they want all experiences to be designed to work well in both scenarios, and I feel like that's a bad idea. So if they wanted to have some sort of Angry Birds port of some kind, they can't do that as well as they could if they had a touchscreen. So is it a touchscreen? That's the main question. Also, do we have any sort of motion control input? We have a Just Dance game coming to the system, so you can either use your phone as the input, which is something that some of the other versions of Just Dance do on the other consoles, but it would be nice if there was a gyro in both Joy-Cons, because then you could use the Joy-Cons as essentially a Wii remote and a nunchuck. I mean, you don't even need a sensor bar if you have a gyro in there. You can just use, think of Splatoon. Like, there's no functionality using that sensor bar in Splatoon. You're just aiming purely through the motion of the controller. And that works. I think even Skyward Sword did that. So I feel like there's potential in having motion control in the Joy-Cons. If not there, at least in the Joy-Con grip, or even in the Pro Controller. I would really like to have a gyro in the Pro Controller because I like playing Splatoon with gyro controls. I know a lot of people are a bit kind of purists about that, but seriously, the gyro controls in Splatoon were top notch. Would never want to do dual analog in Splatoon. The gameplay style just doesn't suit it. Even if you were able to adjust the speed of the axes separately, like the x-axis and the y-axis using dual analog, I'm still not good at dual analog, but I can play Splatoon with a gyro. So I really want gyro input in all of the controller configurations. Another concern I have is for the actual operating system of the console. Now, the Wii U and the Wii both had sort of clunky OSs in my opinion, and I recognize that it's partially due to the actual limitations of the hardware. There wasn't a lot of RAM on the Wii U, so it's not like they could have Miiverse running in the background all the time and still be able to do really great visual experiences like Mario Kart 8. So I understand why the OS was a little bit slow, but I really want them to fix that because I feel like that's important. And also, don't make simple tasks difficult to do. Like deleting or transferring data on your hardware should not require a manual of several paragraphs to be able to understand. It should be simple. It should be elegant. Like, I want Apple product elegance on my Nintendo console. It's probably a tall order, but I would love that. I mean, I'll deal with it. I dealt with the Wii U's weird clunky OS, so I can deal with another one, but, not everybody will deal with it. Not everybody tolerates that kind of thing. So, better OS. Also, obvious concern is battery life. Will this thing run longer than 3 hours? Please, I would love for that to be a thing. I mean, I don't personally care because I'll play it at home, but I know people who care about portable experiences want to be able to play longer than 3 hours. So that's another thing. Plus, having it in like a sleep mode so you could do things like Street Pass, you want that thing to be able to last longer than 3 hours. I don't know if there's any other hardware like smartphones or tablets that have a comparable graphical power that also play games, and if they do, how long do those last when they're playing games? I mean, iPhones don't last that long when you're playing games, so I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but those are some of my concerns. Obviously, third-party support is a big deal, and a lot of people like to say that the same thing happened with the Wii U, and then look what happened. 1 year later, all of that third-party support was gone, but I feel like that was the fault of Nintendo. I feel like it's on Nintendo's shoulders to support the system with as much first-party offerings as possible, which would attract as many consumers as possible in that launch window, because that's when it really matters. If you can get a large install base in the first year, then third parties will continue to develop for your system. Like, that's what really went wrong with the Wii U, is that even after a year, there wasn't a lot of stuff that people wanted to play on the console. So third parties were like, well, there's no install base here. We can't continue to develop. So Nintendo needs to play their cards right. They can do this better than the Wii U. It doesn't have to turn out like the Wii U. It can, but it doesn't have to. So if they can get as many users to adopt the Switch early, then third-party support potentially could stick around until they stop supporting the PS4, baseline PS4 and baseline Xbox One, because while they are creating the Pro and the Scorpio, they still have to support those baseline levels of their consoles. And if the Switch is close to the power level of the Xbox One or the PS4, then yeah, third parties are going to be willing to potentially slightly downscale their games to play on the Switch. And as more third-party support comes in, more games are released from third-party and first-party, more users are going to adopt the platform, more security for those third-party supporters. So, get that support early, Nintendo. Do whatever it takes. Try to buy exclusivity or timed exclusivity if necessary. Like, do whatever you can. Make people want the console early. So this video's gone a lot longer than I actually thought it would, so I think I'm just going to end it here, but I do still want to talk about those precious few seconds of gameplay that they had in the trailer, so be on the lookout for that video, as well as the one where I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the actual physical design of the hardware. So until then, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, or just tweet at me at ArtsyOmni on Twitter. And until then, I guess I'll see you guys later.